Now it is time for the round 3 observations for the award-winning 7-seat Kia Sorrento. So let's start with this. There's no way, observation number 1, that Sam Edmund and Luke Hodge could defend Eric Hipwood's 7-year contract today like they did 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
My goodness.
stitch up.
I thought we were going to throw to the audio.
Observation
Well, you brought a prop in.
Observation number 1A. Eric Hipwood has more years left on his contract than he averages possessions in 2023, and that is a fact.
Oh.
That is an actual fact. He averages 5.6 disposals through 3 games in 2023.
Horny wants him to become an intercept offender. Do you think we'll see it experimented with?
Hodgie, will
Why
we
don't
see
I
him
ask you,
go back?
Hodgie?
I don't think that's going to be the case.
Okay.
No. It's been no doubt. It's been tough. It hasn't, by the look of it as well. It hasn't been the easiest forward line to be in. The way they've moved the ball 2 out of the 3 weeks has been pretty ugly. So I'm tipping the forwards are hoping for a better night on Thursday.
Carlton, observation number 2, are undefeated, but they aren't travelling that well. Now, the Tools, De Koning, Pitnet, Silvani and Mackay aren't going that well. So 30 inside 50s in the second half for 3 goals, which is very inefficient. I know they missed some opportunities, but just on Harry Mackay, 2 goals for the year.
Fair way off it, I
is
reckon.
going really ordinary, Sammy. In fact, and Gerard, I had a look at the champion player ratings, the ones that you like.
Yeah.
Only Lockie O'Brien is rated higher than Harry Mackay at Carlton this year.
Yeah, so 2 goals for the year. Targeted 19 times, if you're interested in that. But his touch isn't there. His timing is out. And funnily enough, we're talking about umpire dissent. He actually dropped that on the run when he was going to snap it. He just dropped it cold before he was tackled.
Well, the ratings actually penalise you, unlike the rankings, which you see 120, 125, etc. The ratings, which you might get a figure of 20-odd, and that's a BOG.
You know what his is? Low 3s.
Oh, well, that's almost negative. I mean, but he would be getting punished severely for missing goals, where there's so much equity built up in that possession by the efforts of other people. Where
It's feast or famine with that.
The average shot at goal would be sort of 80%. If you miss those, you get heavily penalised. But 3 is it's a struggle.
It's a real
Kane,
struggle, Jared. Go, Hodgie.
The only thing is they're sitting third on the ladder.
Yep.
They've got North Melbourne,
Yep.
Adelaide, St Kilda, West Coast and Brisbane the next 5 weeks. I reckon the Carlton supporters, even though they're not playing their best football at the moment, I reckon they're looking pretty good. And
Yeah, no, I understand.
I've got them down winning most of those next 5.
Yeah, and you're right in what you're saying, but does that mask how you're going? So I think you can look at it and go, okay, that's the case and undefeated and the draw is favourable. But if you're really analysing it, and you would hope that Michael Voss is doing that, that was an ordinary performance, I thought, on the weekend. So hopefully, win, lose or draw, you analyse it the same way.
100%. But this time of year, it's about getting wins. It's not about playing your best football, because we saw Melbourne. Melbourne played their best football to round 10 last year, and everyone was sitting back going, how good are they? Who can get near them? No one, until teams started to try things, and then they found out a way past them. At this stage, throughout the year, you want to start getting prime, playing your best football from round 17, 18 onwards, and get that smooth run as Geelong did last year. This part of the year is about blood and young blokes and get as many wins together as you can without having to play your best style of football.
It's also about getting confidence in your goal-kicking technique, which is something Harry needs to address.
Yeah, I think he needs to work out what kick he's going to do at what's part of the ground. I don't care if he does a snap. We've all come around to that. But when he does a snap one moment and then 10 minutes later he kicks a drop punt. So he's just a little bit confused at the moment, and they need him to play better, and I'm sure he will. Observation number 4. On the same game, GWS are right to blame the umpire for the loss on Saturday, but they would also be right to blame themselves for letting Cripps have 25 in the first half and then another 17 in the second half. Observation 4A, they could also blame themselves for letting Toby Green starve at half forward when he was clearly having an off day and getting beaten by Nick Newman and not once putting him on ball, Gerard.
No, I'm with you there, Kane. I don't like coaches allowing people to drown when they're being tagged. I think it's been going on for way too long. Coaches and staff have got a lot better than they were 20 years ago when tags, or 30 years ago when tags were just locked on, chained to your ankle. People were then put to the half-back flank or the half-forward flank into the goal square. But I was surprised that they didn't move him. I question whether or not he's carrying an injury or they didn't want to expose him to the kilometres you need to do. And they may have also thought that Newman would just go with him. So they're the only elements.
So
sort of
Hodgie,
consider.
Green had a lot of Crips on the weekend, and they had a stack of the footy each. Like Green had high 30s as well, and plenty of it, but Crips was more damaging. I guess the instruction for a young player like Green to go to Crips, but then give him no respect. I'm not sure that's the right way to go about it.
Not when there's someone who's a reigning Brownlow medalist who can have such a big impact in and around the stoppages. You might do it at the first quarter to sort of see, is it my day or is it his day? If he's got 25 at half time and he's a damaging 25, has a fair impact on the game, plus the scoreboard is sort of showing a favour their way, then you have to tighten up. And it goes back. He's still learning the caper, and as he has more experience, he'll understand when he's got to go and spend a little bit more time beside a key opponent, and then when there is time to run off, you can't just play Russian roulette with some of the best in the AFL.
So to that point, observation number 5, I think we're up to, the journey of Caleb Serong is perfect. So they start him as a negating midfielder who had, perhaps he had to learn some of the defensive aspects of the game. He used to go and play on the best player for the first 2-3 years of his career. I remember he tried to do a job on Sam Walsh, and Walsh in the second half ran away from him. And now he's developed into that offensive threat, and we see him win the Glendenning medal in the Derby and the play that he has developed. So, I don't know. We can speak. I know you want to speak about Jason Horne-Francis shortly, Hodgie, but perhaps there's something to learn for not only Horne-Francis, but younger players coming through to learn that defensive aspect of their game. On Port Adelaide, observation number 6, Connor Rozee will be captain next year. So write that down on April the 3rd, Sammy. Connor Rozee will captain Port Adelaide next year.
All the best to him. Have you got a subcategory for Port Adelaide? If not, I do.
Go.
At 1 and 2, how much pressure, extra pressure, comes on Ken Hinkley, who's coaching for his life at the moment, out of that showdown loss? Because they've conceded 21 goals.
Yep.
They conceded 18 goals at the weekend, 21 against Collingwood. The defence is undersized, but it's getting whacked at ground level as well. Ripped apart by Rankin and Thilthorpe now. David Koch says wait until August, but will we be waiting until August?
I don't know. All that is fair. And, I mean, if you had have asked me at the start of the year, will Ken Hinkley be coaching next year, I would have said no, because something extraordinary would have had to have happened. So none of this is news to me. I'm disappointed in the way that they've defended. Their draw is really difficult. So Sydney away, Western Bulldogs, West Coast, St Kilda and Essendon before it gets a little bit easier than that. Is there anything to gain, though, by putting the pressure on him now?
When you say something extraordinary has to happen,
Well,
how extraordinary do you think it has to be?
Well, it had to be a grand final.
Had to be a grand final?
He's been to prelim finals 2 in a row.
Yeah.
And didn't quite get there, and that wasn't enough. After 11 years, I think even he would have said a lot's going to have to go right for me to be here next year.
I think, given where they've come from, if he had got to a prelim final with a youngish list, I think that probably would be enough. But,
I would have thought so. Yeah.
But
different.
Would have made it hard.
Yeah, they're a long way off it at the present time, and I think they identified their big deficit, and that is a big, tall, strapping defender. They threw a lot of their bank cards at Asava Ratugolea, and he was happy to come over, but the Cats made a smart decision and kept him because he's going to be a player.
And finally, observation number 7. So Clayton Oliver kicked 3 goals last year. Patrick Cripps kicked 20. And we know what happened with Patrick Cripps. Clayton Oliver is now going at a goal a game for only 3 games. I get it. If Clayton Oliver kicks 20 goals this year, he wins the Brownlow medal. And I think that is the next level for him to go to, and there isn't many more levels that he can go, because after 150 games, he's about the most accomplished player, I don't know, in the last 20 years. Let's say that for Clayton Oliver. He's done everything, but he hasn't been a goal kicker, and he hasn't been a real forward half threat like De Goey and other players Cripps became last year. I reckon he's identified that. Doesn't need as much of the footy, but needs more damage, and I'm really liking the progression of the way his career is going, Hodgie.
100%. He's someone he's worked so much on his game. I love the way he plays. He's hard. He's aggressive. He gives a little bit to the opposition. But for a bloke, when he first got into the AFL, there was questions on his fitness. He did look a little bit chubby. I think in one of his interviews before the draft.
Yeah, he spoke about that this week.
Yeah,
he said he didn't have to work on his fitness. He said you got to work on your fatness.
He said, "Why are you so fat?" Let's be blunt. That's what he said.
Can you imagine that happening these days?
know.
But the only thing is, he's someone who continually wants to work and get better. If you look at his kicking, his first few years, he wasn't a great kick. He ballooned a lot. He wasn't able to pinpoint. Now when he gets the ball, he's got the composure to either use it by hand. Centre forward, he's a beautiful kick. He knows where the space is. He knows he doesn't have to kick it too hard. But as you said, Kane, he's kicked a couple pretty crucial goals the last couple of weeks. He's someone who some people get to a certain standard and think that's where I'm at. I'm happy with where I'm at. He's not. He's someone who continually wants to work and get better. So saying that he is a potential Brownlow medalist, 100%, because of the way he goes about and he's always under the umpire's nose.
Well, their big bodies got hold of Sydney yesterday, and Joe's texted in and said to Hodgie, Swans have a structural flaw, no big-bodied mids, which exposed them in the grand final. Some like Damien Barrett falsely wrapped Chad Warner up as one of the best players in the comp, far from it. But he is 181 and 82 underwhelming when compared to the physical attributes of Petrarca, Oliver and co. I'd support Damo saying it is one of the best young midfielders in the comp, but they do lack a replacement for Kennedy, who was the best midfield clearance player that the Swans have ever had. I don't think the numbers back that up.
Yeah, Sydney have changed their game style as well to suit the players that they have. So they used to be a stoppage long down the line, get as many stoppages with Joshy Kennedy there on that small oval. Now they're looking to play free-flowing, similar to Collingwood, switch off the half-back line. They'll do anything but to try and get a stoppage. You're right, though. Brisbane went through the same thing. They got bullied in finals by Richmond, by Geelong for a few years. So that's why they had to target and go and get Dunkley and the likes to try and have bigger bodies around there. Sydney are probably looking to do the same thing, because if in a home and away game, you can have that free-flowing up-back football. And look, they got to the grand final, but it's when those big bodies... I remember sitting there thinking, well, Luke Parker's a pretty big body. And I remember looking at the grand final, he was standing next to Paddy Dangerfield.
Yeah.
And Paddy Dangerfield just monstered him. And
Blitzarves.
That's Blitzarves. It's a pretty big midfield to go up against. Guthrie, Blitzarves and Dangerfield.
Well.
And then when it's grand final day, it's hot. Everyone's at the peak. Everyone's playing pressure football. You need those big bodies to help you get through. And I think it's a fair assessment that they're probably on the lookout for another big body midfield to help in that area.
Hodgie, just whilst we're on Sydney, and I thought Buddy played pretty well yesterday. Like, he looked like their most dangerous tall forward, but just the flow and effects that it has for Amadi and Logan McDonald when you've got someone who just commands the footy, whatever it is. He's got this presence, he puts his arms out. You would know it better than anyone, and you are drawn to kick him the footy. He's good enough to be in the team. In fact, he's their most dangerous tall forward. But are the Swans better when he's in the team? Which sounds like a really strange question to ask.
Yeah, well, that's what they would have been discussing last year when they were going through this contract talk, when it was thrown up whether he's going to go to Gold Coast or he's going to go to Brisbane. Sydney would have been having this discussion of what's going to happen post Buddy Franklin. So they know that they have to start to develop these younger guys, and whether Bud plays a little bit further up the ground or they rest him once every 3 or 4 weeks, because you're right, when Bud plays consistent football, he doesn't have that zip. He looks a little bit slow. It's tougher for him to bend over. That's what happens with age, and he is 6'5". But if he has a break every 3 or 4 weeks and is fresh, he can still tear a game apart because of his athleticism, what he can do. But planning for the future is definitely would be on their mind for sure.
What would you do with Jason Horne-Francis? You've noticed a couple of things in his game which you spoke about last week.
No, it was more the coaching style, because I was very similar to him when I got drafted. So you get drafted higher. All you had your mindset on when you were a kid was, I want to get the football. It's not about running with someone, or if they get the ball, I'm just going to run to where I think I can get the ball next. In AFL these days, you can't do it because there's cameras everywhere. And unfortunately for him being a young fella, you've probably already seen the stuff going on Twitter on people identifying him not chasing again this week. My question to you was, who's the midfield coach at Port Adelaide who'd be working with him? Because you can't just say in today's game, oh, he's a young kid, he'll get better in time. You need to show him clips. You need to work with him to say, mate, for you to be a gun AFL offensive and defensive player, you need to be working on it. So, I think you followed Rosie pretty closely as well.
He's in good hands, I reckon, Hodgie. So Josh Carr is a midfield coach, and he had that defensive aspect of his game, and probably one of the better teammates you could ever ask for, Josh Carr. And Travis Boak is as hard a runner as there is in the game, both offensively and defensively, and he's his mentor. So
wasn't so much a chase, hands. Wasn't it sort of just a lack of pressure?
I just think he just watched Hodgie's observation. I think is fair that he just sort of watches the play unfold and he's almost a passenger to it. When the ball's in the area, there's not many better at 19 years of age. Like he's an animal if the ball's in his area. It's when it's outside of that in open play that he's just struggling to work out how to influence the game in those areas.
Hey, Hodgie,
That comes through training, that comes through habit, and it just comes from a bit of fitness, but also a little bit of education of when to look for it. Because I've got no doubt that if that was the ball bubbling instead of a player at the opposition with the ball, he would have chased after it and picked it up and do what he does best. But because he's naturally not instinctive a chaser, where if as you said, Kari's his coach, he made a living off that. He was hard, he was disciplined. So it's just good to hear that he's in good hands and getting.
And he did have 7 tackles and 6 clearances, so it wasn't a disaster. And his ball use was really good. So I'm not concerned.
But in and around the stoppage, he can. He's as competitive as they are in and around when he's a chance to win the ball. It's just that off-ball stuff, which coaches have been onto it for 15 years, but a lot of the public are now starting to watch it. And because he's had a fair bit of publicity, all the stuff from North Melbourne coming back over there, people will look for it. So he's going to keep getting hounded until he can improve in that area.
Now, before we move on, we're on this particular game, Port Adelaide and Adelaide Crows. There seems to be a lot of interest in the Showdown Medal, and the coaches' votes are out, Hodgie. Before we go to the coaches' votes, who did you like?
I've actually read the article with one of the guys who did the votes, who gave it, but
that was the Adelaide journo who.
Simon.
I'm trying to think.
Yeah, Simon Thomas Wilson. Yep.
Yeah, so it was. He ended up giving it to
Jordan Dawson.
Yep. I thought it was a hard game. It was one of those games where you could have 5 people that could have been there, but I realised the coaches went a different way.
Well, the coaches gave Isaac Rankin 10, and Champion Data's ratings, they gave Isaac Rankin best on ground by a considerable way. Riley Thilthorpe, he got 7. Jordan Dawson got 5. Powell Pepper 3. O'Brien got 3, and Connor Rozee got 2. But gee, there was some interest in it.
There was interest in it because I guess that they appeared to get it wrong. Those at the ground, I think David King probably most accurately reflected the coaches' votes, and he wasn't
Vindicated as
at
well.
the ground.
Is
That being said,
because-
Hodgie, should the voters be at the ground?
It depends what you look for.
Yeah.
I know when I watch football, I watch for what's going on behind the ball. So the person who has 35 touches isn't always best on ground, in my opinion. And I've finished games where I've given votes to blokes that had 10 touches less, but their setup and what they did without the ball was more important and helped the team win.
But Jared, hang on, if you've ever been in the Fox Footy bunker, you couldn't see any more than what's at Kingy's disposal.
I'm glad you raised it because I was just about to. I'm not
He
sure
had everything.
What's it matter whether you're at the ground or not
Well,
if you've got the same access to the
He had
people that
more
are at the ground.
Actually, he had more access.
Would you allow the Norm Smith medal voter not to be at the ground?
Well, if he was in the Fox studios, I would have confidence that he's seen everything. I mean, it's only semantics, really.
Kingy would have had more at his disposal than Simon would have at the ground.
I personally reckon it's easier watching who's best on off the TV. 100%. Because you're focused into what's there, who's gotten the ball, who's having impact. When you're at the game, sometimes you're looking at things that you miss a lot of important clearances because you're looking at the setup or the matchups or stuff behind the ball.
Absolutely. I find when I'm in the crowd at the MCG, I'm continually looking at the scoreboard because you're so far away from the game.
Plus, you line up, you get a hot dog and a beer.
Exactly.
Hodgie, we've touched on Dangerfield's captaincy a little bit over the last fortnight, certainly. He was on the bench for 11 minutes in the last quarter, which interests me. But the absence of Joel Selwood and Dangerfield's captaincy, what have you observed?
No, I heard that he's struggling with the captaincy compared to Selwood, and he's missing him But I feel that's pretty harsh. You can't change with a captaincy just because a bloke's gone for 6 months. That doesn't change the culture and the standards and the expectations of one another. So I feel the comparison to Danger is a bit harsh. What I am saying is he misses him more as a teammate. He's missing him as someone who will get in there and when their backs are against the wall, you know what Selwood's going to do. He come off the bench in the finals last year, he had 12 touches in the grand final because he's just a competitive beast. But then you add that with Duncan, Henry, Kolajasny, Menengola, Stanley missed, and then Tommy Stewart who missed with his knee a couple of weeks ago. He's back this week.
And Hawkins may as well have missed.
And Hawkins he's doing the best that he can with an under pre-season than what we've seen him in the past. He's been someone who's been able to hold on to his AFL career because of his fitness and his agility. He doesn't have that because of a poor pre-season through surgery. So I'm sort of sitting back going, give Danger a little bit of a chance. He's captain for 3 games, and they've had probably the 7 blokes there that I've just mentioned out of the side. The other thing, what they've done is brought in Braun and Bowes, they're also planning for the future as well. They've got some good young DeConing. They've got some good young players who are going to help bring them back up to where we expect them to be.
Well said, Hodgie. I think it puts a little bit of common sense around the Dangerfield debate.
I'd be just as interested wondering what's happened to Cam Guthrie. He doesn't look like the same player, does he? And Tyson Stengel has had a quiet couple of weeks. And Brad Close has had a quiet couple of weeks. So, yeah.
Hodgie, tell us about your first grand final or premiership and your post-premiership experience.
Celebrations. Get ahead of yourself.
It is. It's celebrations. It is stuff that. Well, I was 24 at the time, and then you sit back and won a game against a team that no one gave us a chance to. So you probably do go over the top. You get a little bit happy with yourself. The runs that you went for on Christmas morning the year before because you lost to North Melbourne in a final, you don't do because I've earned a rest. Everyone who you go and see, you have that extra beer. Because, we'll have one with me just because you want a flag. And so you do. Your intensity drops off that little bit. But if that happens for 25, and I'm not saying this happened with Geelong, but that's what happened with us in 2008. If it drops off just a little bit for everyone, that's a big gap from where you were starting pre-season after coming off a loss compared to celebrating for too long after a grand final.
So can you click back into gear?
No. I feel that if your pre-season's bad because of your preparation, we couldn't. We had a lot of injuries 2009 and missed the finals. You can't just click back if you've had a poor preparation into a season. AFL is too competitive. It's too hard to try and play catch up when you want to. You got to do it back in. What do they say? You can't win grand finals in November. Andrew Russ used to have a good old saying. You probably said it to you. You can't win premierships in November, but you can lose them. And that's by your attitude, how you rock up, and how you train to get fit before the practice matches.
Yeah, I think we've all had that as experience as players. It's how much you invest in yourself in those 3 months post the grand final that determines generally how you play. If you get an injury, soft tissue injury, and you've got the tank, you've got the extra Ks in the body, it doesn't take you too long. You don't lose form just because of a soft tissue injury.
No doubt about that.
But if you've cheated pre-season, it comes out badly.
Hodgie, Collingwood once again continue to march on, but you've noticed something about their win on Friday night.
I'm happy with how they're going. They're a team that should have probably put the Tigers away in the first half. Their goal kicking, what were they, 3-10, I think, at half time. So they kept Richmond in it. But I just like the way how they've brought blokes into the club who's been able to play roles. And their hunt in and around the contest, the Goey looks fit. Love how he's had a solid pre-season after interrupted one and all the stuff that happened with him off field. But the mix of Mitchell coming in, the Goey, you got Adams playing through there. Pendlebury's now he can actually sit back and doesn't feel he's got to carry this team because he's got so many blokes in and around him. I just reckon they've got so many role players that are fitting in nicely and happy to play their role.
One that really impressed me is McCreary.
Yes,
he just keeps
Gerard.
on getting better and better.
He's a gun.
He is. Didn't know when I first saw him whether he was going to make the grade, and then all of a sudden I've seen him a fair few times this year on the back of improvement last year, and geez, he is improving rapidly.
Really good.